I rise today because this is one of the top priorities for me as the ranking Democrat on education. And we've heard a lot of messaging today in unity about how we have to do more for our kids and improving reading and literacy and competency, and that our kids and our parents and our communities and our teachers deserve better and they deserve more. And I am thrilled to hear the language of my colleagues on the other side talk about the need to do more. And when I took the position of ranking on education, I met with my colleague, the chair of education, the assembly representative to the 1st District. And when we spoke in that initial meeting, we talked about the need to work collaboratively on reading and literacy. And in that meeting, I committed to my colleague and said, I will do everything I can in my power to create good legislation that is bipartisan, that finds areas of compromise, that meets the needs of our teachers and our kids, and gets something across the finish line. And I'm true to my word, and I meant that. And so, as much as I am thankful to my colleague from the 1st for his work since November, as he mentioned on the floor, I have not been involved, nor have members of my caucus been involved in the drafting of this bill. And I think that's really important because our best work comes from the compromise at the table over months of conversation as we work with partners both in and out of the building and with our agencies. In March, when the chair of the Education Committee called a public hearing on literacy, I spent the entire month of February talking to every single group I possibly could talk to. Every person on every side of this issue I talked to. I spent hours listening to podcasts and reading books, things that I agreed with and things that I didn't, because I wanted to immerse myself into this issue because I felt so passionately that this was something that we could do. And in that informational hearing with the Senate, it was a joint informational hearing, we heard from folks around the country, we heard from stakeholders, we heard from DPI, and there were so many things we agreed on. And I felt after that meeting very hopeful that there was good policy there in those conversations. And this is where the story takes a turn, because after that hearing, I heard nothing. I asked over and over again, what was happening? What were we working on? And I asked to be included in the negotiations and in the drafts. But all I heard from partners was something is happening, but I kept being told, you can't be involved in this because we're working with DPI. And if we're working with DPI, then we assume you all will be in support of it. And whether that may or may not be historically true in terms of our agencies supporting one party or the other, the truth of the matter is DPI is not a proxy for legislative Democrats, or especially those on the Education Committee. We all work together and have a role in the negotiations of good policy. And so today, this sort of positioning, Mr. Speaker, that this is a bipartisan bill, it feels disingenuous at best, but quite frankly, it feels like orchestrated chaos to me. Because I got the bill when it came out last week, or whatever it was, a couple weeks ago, Monday. When I received the bill, since then, there were multiple amendments. It was sent to State Affairs. It was like trying to play a game of whack-a-mole, Mr. Speaker. And again, it's very difficult when you're trying to do your best work when you're only given 3 pieces to a 50-piece puzzle. And then you're trying to guess what the intentions are. And you're running around in circles like a cat chasing your tail. And it feels like I'm being toyed with. It feels like we're being toyed with. This morning when the amendment came forward, I was happy to see that my colleague from the first adjusted and made changes to the bill because, yes, one of the main issues that we had was around the mandatory retention and the harms and the way that it would be implemented. And I applaud that effort. And I believe that the other provisions, some of the other provisions in the amendment do good, just work. But it is incredibly difficult when someone drops an amendment on you on a bill that, as the author said, is very complicated. And we are given mere hours, and then the bill is moved to the top of the schedule for today. It feels disingenuous at best. It feels more like orchestrated chaos. There are so many good things in this bill that I wish I could vote for. I mean, the literacy screener, the professional development, the coaches, the curriculum updates. These are good provisions, and when we know better, we do better. But all of that being said, Mr. Speaker, there are too many unanswered questions, and perhaps if we had been a part of the process, we would know the answers. But due to the rush nature of this bill, we do not have them. And there's too many concerns about the implementation of the bill. And there's too much of a desire from our stakeholders to be a part of the process. People and communities do not like it when something is done to them. If you want to have them on your side, you bring them in. Our teachers are under incredible strain and stress. And one of the things that I am concerned about with this bill, and yes, the $50 million investment, that is great, but separated from the bill, which is very concerning, doesn't address the underlying issues in education. Now, I was told many times in the public hearing back in March that we were not to talk about school funding or other issues in public education. But again, it's like talking about one piece of a puzzle without seeing the whole elephant. If we do not have these answers provided to us, how can we know that this bill will be implemented with fidelity? Some key concerns, Mr. Speaker. Workforce development. If we are going to be investing in professional development training for teachers, who is paying for that? Is that coming out of the $50 million? Are districts supposed to pay for that? Is that an unfunded mandate? And furthermore, the letters training, which we hear over and over about when people quote the Mississippi Miracle, which there is no such thing as miracles in education. There is simply intention and sustainability and honest, transparent work. There are no miracles. There is intention and good policy. But this letters training, Mr. Speaker, it takes 2 years, 160 hours. And a third of teachers leave after 5 years. So as good stewards of our taxpayer dollars, Mr. Speaker, how do we know that that money is going to be invested? There is no one-size approach to reading and literacy. There are good things in here. But the effort around some and the organizing of this bill has been disingenuous at best and chaotic at worst. I urge this body, Mr. Speaker, to put partisanship aside, take this bill up in committee, rework it, work with our partners. We want to pass this bill. We want a good budget for our schools. We want our kids to be fed. We want increased per pupil funding. We want special education reimbursements to go up because none of this happens in a silo. There is no deadline on this bill, folks. The $50 million is there, and it will be there when we have good policy to back it up and when we have our partners on board. And as much as it pains me, Mr. Speaker, I cannot vote for this bill. I wish I could. There's too many unanswered questions, and it didn't have to be this way. The vote is no.